What ho, ladies and gentlemen, Luke Ennis here, time for a new movie review. This one is the Mafu Cage. So the Mafu Cage was directed by Karen Arthur. It stars Lee Grant and Carol Kane as a pair of sisters. Carol Kane plays Sissy, who is virtually a hermit, doesn't really leave the house. Lee Grant is Ellen, the much older sister who kind of cares for the not particularly well balanced Sissy, mentally speaking. They have a cage in their house, the Mafu Cage, which is essentially a custom built cage for housing primates. It is clear that from the way that her and her sister discuss it, she's recently killed an ape in her strange mental state. From there, it's basically a look at Sissy's intense mental state and her sister's attempts to kind of hold some sort of control over that. So before we go any further, I should point out that I watched the Mafu Cage under the name Don't Ring The Doorbell. Because anyone who watches a lot of particularly sort of 70s and 80s horror will know that the word don't is a classic exploitation title word. You know, don't answer the phone, don't go in the house, don't go in the woods alone, that sort of thing. To be fair, with the packaging and stuff, they have tried to make it look more modern, but there's no disguising how old the movie is once you put it in. And this is no reflection on the movie itself, I should point out, but this edition is a VHS rip, and not a particularly good one either. It's just quite a degraded VHS. Pretty much the whole way through it's doing that thing where the image is sort of bouncing a little bit, that you get with VHS cassettes. So yeah, I watched it as Don't Ring The Doorbell. I know that there's a bunch of other titles, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I saw a list online somewhere. This film kind of illustrates quite a lot about the amount of variety there is when you look at, you know, sort of horror cinema from the 70s and 80s, particularly the 70s. I mean, I say this is a movie that's got Lee Grant and Carol Kane. Lee Grant in a sort of later role in her career, and Carol Kane in quite an early one. The standard of the acting is great, as you would associate with those names. This is a total psychological horror movie, I guess. I'm slightly critical a little bit of that phrase, but this is definitely, that's where the kind of the tension is drawn from. There's no two ways about that for me. I mean, really, this film is about the way in which Sissy thinks. Obviously, she's suffering from some serious problems related to her dad's death. She grew up mostly in sort of the jungles of Africa, you know. And there's this weird sort of thing of cultural appropriation going on where she's sort of dressing up in quite sort of tribal garb and all of that sort of thing. It's a very odd little movie in that regard, and kind of the way that it reflects that in the score, you know, dependent on which character is the focus. You know, you can get quite a lilting classical score while the movie's following Ellen's life, and a very traditional African tribal sort of style score while Sissy is the focus. In plot wise, this movie is pretty good. It's quite a good setup. It's an interesting setup, and I mean, in a way it's quite simple, but it does it well. It's got to be said, this movie does what it does very well. I've got to say credit to Carol Kane, because I mean, by far the weirdest part of the movie, and this is a very weird movie, has to be the montage of her hanging out with this monkey. The acting is so intense, and it borders on comical, just how intense the acting is. And this whole movie does kind of have quite a profound impact. I've got to say there are a lot of problems with it though as well. I mean, aside from the two leads, most of the rest of the acting's pretty abominable. This movie's 95 minutes long. I understand that a longer cut has now been released, but this is, I guess, like the standard theatrical version, if you will. And this movie's heavily padded. Like there's easily, I'd say, 15 minutes that could be cut from this movie, and that's not just them trying to get to a feature length, you know, trying to extend something that would be under an hour out over to, you know, 75 minutes or whatever. This is a case of it would be feature length even if you shaved a lot of it out, and there's a lot of stuff that could go from this movie, really. Another big problem is some of the choices of shots and the way it's cut together is very weird. You know, very sudden jumps where a character has moved a certain distance that there's no way they would have been able to move in that time, like that sort of thing. And then generally the fact that this film is lit so poorly. I mean, part of it is, granted, because I'm watching a very shitty transfer, but like the screen is so dark you might as well be staring at the fucking wall a lot of the time, like seriously. I mean, yeah, no, that was a major problem that really distracted from everything. I've tried not to let the fact that this is obviously an old VHS tape that has been transferred digitally onto DVD, I've tried not to let that really interfere with my view of the film. There were things that, you know, even without the fact that it's a VHS cassette that has been transferred, would have been a problem, and the lighting is one of them. I'm sure this video hasn't really got much of a wide appeal. I mean, this movie ultimately, it's known under a variety of different titles from what I've seen. It doesn't have a Wikipedia page, so this is how kind of obscure this movie is. I'm probably going to find it really hard to find a poster for the thumbnail, you know. This was a pretty solid movie, not without its problems, but there was definitely, I wouldn't have too much issue with watching it again. I mean, not straight away obviously, but you know. So I mean, overall I'm going to give the Mafu Cage a 7 out of 10. This was, yeah, quite an enjoyable psychological thriller, unfortunately quite technically limited, despite a good show of some more complex narrative concepts. Overall it was an interesting movie and definitely an enjoyable watch. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. There is a link to my podcast in the description. It's called Ironcast. Please do go and check it out if you're into music. That's my main focus. This is all just for fun, really. The podcast is what truly matters. So yeah, like I say, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully I'll be back soon. Well, I'll say that I'll be back in a minute with another review.